It's a genuine pleasure to introduce two of my former colleagues from Newcastle University, Dr. Sally Waite from the Archaeology department and Dr. Susanna Phillippo from the Classics department. Sally is a classical archaeologist who's published widely and researched on the history of collections and collecting, particularly around Greek artwork and pottery. She's worked closely with the Shefton collection at the Great North Museum in Newcastle and has done some fantastic work with community curriculum projects with young people in the Newcastle area. Susanna is a classicist of primarily Greek literature and language, and also of the classical tradition, especially the Greek influences on 16th century French drama and 18th century opera. And I've had the pleasure in the past to listen to Susanna sing some opera in a research seminar. This evening, then, we're going to hear about their award-winning project, which won a Public Engagement Award from the Institute of Classical Studies earlier this year, around their work with the heritage in Northumberland. So I'm going to pass on to Sally and Susanna straight away for their talk on Greece Recreated.
Thanks very much, April. That's very kind. Right, let's get this working. So thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. Before we begin, Sally and I just wanted to give our thanks to both the anonymous donor behind the Institute of Classical Studies Public Engagement Award and the Institute of Classical Studies themselves for allowing us to have this. This is what's permitted us to go ahead with what's been a very exciting project and has livened what might have been a bit of a grim summer otherwise work-wise. So, the award has enabled us to work together on an online exhibition exploring the influences of classical literature and Greek archaeology and landscape on Sir Charles Monk, who was the owner of an estate near Newcastle, Belsay Hall, and the way in which those influences have been expressed in the way that he developed that estate. This is something that we've been in different ways working on for some time. I've been doing some work on Monk's travel diaries, and those diaries, alongside artifacts from the Shefton collection, have been used in this exhibition to recreate the story of Monk's travels in the Mediterranean and exploring ways and the wide variety of ways in which the classical past inspired him. I'm going to start by playing a clip from those diaries, which relates to one of his places that Monk visited on his 1805 trip, which links to, and which we'll come back to later in terms of the details of how our exhibition has worked. This requires a certain amount of, oops. Oh. Sorry. This requires a certain amount of adjustment because of the, right. So.
Sunday, 8th of September. After breakfast, we set out, a priest on horseback going first to show us, up a mountain north of Vari, being a member of Hephaestus, to the Paneum, or Cave of Pan. We found it having ascended by a very steep and rugged road. The entrance is a hole 8 or 10 feet long and 6 or 9 broad of an uneven oval shape. A small fig tree, having root in the rock a few feet down below the mouth, shoots its branches up through. We descended by the rugged corners of the rock 5 or 6 steps. Then you see on the wall of the rock opposite you a square incised tablet. Opposite this, on your left hand, a lion's head rudely cut upon a protuberant knob of the rock as large as life. Proceed descending a little, and turning to the left, you come into a broad hall lightened by the mouth of the cave, exceedingly beautiful, lined with stalactites forming cane-like flutes and columns against the sides of the rock. On your left, a figure of the rudest sculpture reliefed upon the face of the rock, in the act of cutting a stone with a hammer and chisel. The cave turns round to come to the same hole by which you descended. On the face of the rock by the side of the perpendicular stairs by which you are to reascend, Pan Or is carved under an incised recess, and by the side of this a rude figure sitting in a chair. Head wanting. Having stayed 2 hours examining the cave and taking drawings in it, Gell and I remounted, leaving Dodwell and Pomardi behind to take more drawings, and steered over Hymettus for Athens, which took us 4 hours. The road over the mountains very rugged. All along the plain, ruins perpetually of ancient towns.
Okay, one of the lesser known sites in Greece which Monk visited, but one which I think has played into his estate in all kinds of interesting ways, which we're hoping to explore in the exhibition. So I'm going to hand over now to Sally.
So Susanna's going to be doing the slides for me, so hopefully this will be a seamless transition. We have given you a little taster of the exhibition there, and we'll come back to Vari and the Cave of Pan a little later. But we wanted to begin by giving you the background to our collaboration. So the project has been a collaboration with the Great North Museum and English Heritage, and it consolidates previous research and engagement work that both Susanna and I have undertaken with these two organisations. And in the presentation, we would like to briefly introduce our engagement and research before returning once more to the exhibition. My engagement work has centred on the development and delivery of an innovative community curriculum. I haven't time to go into what exactly a community curriculum is. I've just got a few pointers there on the slide, which kind of give the bare details of community curriculum making. This curriculum is for teaching ancient Greece in primary schools, the Great North's Children's Hospital and the Great North Museum. And the curriculum was developed in collaboration with colleagues in the Centre for Learning and Teaching at Newcastle University, West Jesmond Primary School, a large inner city primary school, and Belsay School, which is in the village of Belsay, just next to Belsay Hall, and is a tiny rural school. To put that in context, there's just 70 children in Belsay School and about 700 in West Jesmond School. So the curriculum is organised around the Shefton collection of Greek archaeology, which is held in the Great North Museum at Newcastle. We've produced a range of resources for teachers, which are now available on our Explore the Past with Us website. Our work with Belsay School led to Reimagining Ancient Greece, an exhibition curated in collaboration with the Great North Museum and English Heritage and held at Belsay Hall. And Susanna's research on Sir Charles Monk's diaries fed into this exhibition. Here we place the children's artworks alongside the artefacts from the Shefton collection, which had inspired them. The children worked with two creative practitioners, and their work was also incorporated into the exhibition. So on the left there, you have a clay model, which was made by the children at Belsay School, along with Graham Taylor of Potted History. And then we had the work of the artist Mina Hadari Waite, and Mina also collaborated with us on the exhibition, on the online exhibition. We'll come back to Pan again later on, but I hand back to Susanna now.
Thank you, Sally. My own engagement project is slightly further behind than Sally's in coming to full fruition, but for some time now I've been working together with Belsay Hall on helping them create material for their website. Actually, as part of a project which they're running called Belsay Awakes, they've been applying for Heritage Lottery funding, and the work that we were doing on this helped in a small way feed into the bid, which was successful. I think it's 1.8 million they've now got to play with. The idea behind this, and it's hopefully going to go live next spring, was to develop an interactive map of the whole site, which linked together pictures from the places in Greece that Monk visited, that inspired him, and some of the things that he responded. This is his drawing there of the Theseon, the Temple of Hephaestus, and the way in which that then expressed itself both in the buildings of Belsay Hall, that's the hall itself, and in some of the landscaping. His liking of Doric architecture alongside seascapes, I think, affects the lake. It's a bit more wintry than Greece was when I was there. So that was the idea. The idea is that you can, the idea is that you've got a clickable map which plays which shows these pictures and also plays some sound links. And we'll be coming back to, we've got the Cave of Pan here again, and some of the links elsewhere. There's links in Sicily. And then on the, there's the map with the rather spectacular overhead view of the quarry gardens at Belsay. A contemporary picture from the 19th century of the quarries under construction and some of the grottos there. And just a very brief clip of some of the sound clips that we'd be having. Oops.
At this Capuchin convent, the Latronia are those of Acradina, and much the largest. The quarter of Acradina was the largest, and they are large in proportion. They are a grand sight. The monks use them as a garden, and a very grand one it is. An orange tree was in full flower, and bees gathering from it. The rock here is soft and like chalk, pure white. My guide tells me it contains many seashells. These Latronia are vast. The only thing I know of which bears any resemblance is the limeworks in Brotherton in Yorkshire.
So that's the idea of the interactive map, which has got explanatory text as well alongside this, but it's all linked around the site. And the hope is that this will help not only draw in visitors online, but also help them to make more sense of the ways the different parts of the Belsay site come together with the neoclassical hall, the quarry gardens and the castle, which at the moment they often felt were, people thought they were very disparate parts of the site. They are in fact very much interconnected. Although the actual delivery of the new web pages and the interactive map on my side has been slightly delayed by the person in overall charge at English Heritage being furloughed throughout COVID, so they haven't been able to work on this for much of this year. As I said, the plan is for that to come online spring next year, but meanwhile, Andrew Han, with whom we've been working in English Heritage, has been creating new history pages for the Belsay site. And this is an example of one of the pages looking at the rather beautiful neoclassical inspired hall with elements from the Erechtheion with the Ionic columns. That's a little bit less austere than some of the rest of the house, and explaining about some of the background to this. With the ideas behind how this works. Okay, so that's having talked through what we've been previously doing in terms of engagement leading up to the current exhibition project. We now want to talk a little bit about our, first of all, my research and then Sally's research, which have fed into this project, and how the two sort of mutually sort of say nourish each other. That's a dreadful phrase. So what I'm interested in all of my research is how people in various ways get inspired by the classical world, what that relationship is like, how it works. And Monk is best known for his inspiration by the physical side of the classical world and its physical outworking in his redesign of his house and estate at Belsay. The so-called Theseon, now better known as the Temple of Hephaestus, was the major architectural inspiration for Monk. He did admire the Parthenon, but found it sort of less a sort of attractive whole, partly I think because the Theseon was actually in a much more attractive setting with lots of greenery, and the as we'll be seeing, the plants alongside architecture are very much Monk's thing. So it's the Theseon on which the entrance portico to Belsay Hall is primarily based. There are drawings in the Northumberland Archive which we've been able to access, which show not, it's very faint, the writing there, but you've actually got details of the way in which the measurements here relate to the measurements of the Theseon. and expressed in this rather grand, if slightly austere, scaled reproduction of the columns of the Sicyon in the entrance to Belsay, which you can see on the top right there. Sorry, I don't know why this happens when I do PowerPoint. So as I said, Monk was very much inspired by the architecture, particularly the Doric architecture, and to a certain extent the monolithic Mycenaean Cyclopean architecture as well, which I have a personal theory that this may explain some of the more austere aspects of Belsay, although Sally has a different view on that one. But he was also at the same time very much inspired by the landscapes which he met on his travels. A lot of the time he's talking not just about the architecture, but the greenery and how they work together when he sees temples. And the quarry gardens at Belsay, this is an English country life photograph here, are always regarded as having been inspired by one of the famous beauty spots in the Mediterranean on the Grand Tour, the quarries at Syracuse, which of course didn't start out life as a beauty spot, but as a prison, but it's one of those ironies of history. But the crucial thing there is that, as I'll be saying a bit later, Monk didn't actually see those before the redesign of Belsay happened. He would have heard about them. He would probably have seen pictures, but he doesn't actually encounter them in the flesh, as it were, until 1831. So one of the things I was interested in looking at was what other sites that he did see in Greece may have inspired him. And the Cave of Pan at Vari is one of those in particular. You'll have gathered from that clip that we played that he was very much impressed by this spectacular underground site with its play of light and shade, tying into ideas of the picturesque and the sublime. And although obviously Belsay itself is not a cave, this idea of rock structure, partly man-made, partly artificial and crafted, with the light shining into it, is very much, you can see the link there. And I think the enthusiasm for the Vari site plays into the design of the quarry gardens. It also, in the course of that visit, I was taken there by archaeologists from the Ephyret in Athens. Turns out that although Monk couldn't have known this, they reckon now that the Cave of Pan was part of a garden site. So it's kind of come full circle in this respect. The other side, and probably the less well-known side of Monk's interactions with the classical world, is the literary side. And one of the things, and of course the literature was how he first got interested in Greece, in his education at Rugby School and under a tutor. And in the diaries, there are lots of exciting things to explore in the way he describes things, but also the ways in which he quotes texts and brings things into it. At Eleusis, as we'll see later, he makes reference to a particular story from mythology. And he also quotes mainly more from Latin literature than from Greek. It's very typical of people of his time, but there are Greek quotations, particularly of the simile from Homer about the cicadas at one of the temples that he visits. And later on in his life, and this is one of the things that I'm working into, the article which I hope to write on this, he started producing a translation of the Iliad, first 3 and a bit books of this, and the cicadas crop up there again in the famous simile from Homer, book 3, describing the old men of Troy. That's the translation. It's the same passage that he quotes in his diaries in 1805. So at this point, I'm just going to briefly play the video that we've linked onto the exhibition site. There are 4 videos where the 4 people involved in this are presenting aspects of their research in various ways. And this is what I had to say about the link between Monk's literary interests in the classical world and seeing the physical sites. Luck, that should work. Mythological references in Monk's travel and other diaries provide intriguing glimpses to how he connected his Greek and Latin reading to things and people that he encountered. Camping out as a young man on the island of Aegina, for example, Monk records the incessant singing of the local cicadas and compares this to a simile from Homer, which linked song to the chattering sound of the old men at Troy. As an old man himself, Monk would later give the cicadas a better write-up when translating Homer. Their truthful voices sounded ever sweet, is the phrase he uses then. Several documents from the Middleton archives testify to Monk's lifelong enthusiasm for Greece and its literature. His grandson's manuscript biography records his attachment to the classics as a boy at Rugby and under a private tutor. Monk's various diaries frequently refer to Greek and Latin literature and myth, often in relation to his other interests. So, for example, at Eleusis, a blue flower reminds Monk of the story of Persephone abducted to the underworld by Pluto. There is also, from the 1850s, Monk's translation of the opening books of Homer's Iliad. As a young man at Mycenae, Monk had surveyed the view from the citadel and been moved to quote lines evoking King Agamemnon's famous and tragic expedition to Troy. His spirited Iliad translation reveals that, even in his 70s, the same story was still gripping Monk's imagination. Okay, back over to Sally.
Okay, so I'm just going to give a very brief summary of my research.
University. I'm going to talk about a red figure vase known as a
Susanna, I think you're playing the video. That was very unnerving.
YouTube sort of goes on to its next one. Sorry about that. Right, hang on.
You get the slide up.
Let's get back to the slide. Always has to be something, doesn't there? Right. Slide. Good, excellent. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem. So a brief introduction to my research and how it ties in with this project. So much of my research focuses on the Shefton collection of Greek archaeology in Newcastle, and also I work on the reception of Greek antiquity. The university has recently acquired the Shefton Archive on permanent loan. The archive consists of thousands of documents detailing Shefton's collecting and research. This invaluable body of unpublished material provides opportunities to develop new insights into how and why the collection was established and developed. And we have currently a partnership PhD student, Daisy Alice Vaughan, who's working on these very questions, and some of her research also features in the exhibition. Insights into the history of the collection were the inspiration behind our recent exhibition to celebrate the centenary of Brian Shefton's birth in 2019. The exhibition explored the object biographies or life stories of a number of artifacts, revealing the untold stories of their journey from manufacture to museum display. One of these objects also features in the Belsay online exhibition, and it's a piece which I have done quite a bit of research on. It's an Athenian red figure calathos of the 5th century BC, which belongs in part to the Society of Antiquaries of Newcastle upon Tyne, and part is on loan from the present Earl of Elgin. The 7th Earl of Elgin marbles fame, has a minor part to play in the lives of Charles Monk and his wife. They met his agent Lucieri in Athens and were critical of Elgin's removal of sculptures from the Athenian Acropolis. The vase is a very rare shape and its exact function is unknown. The image depicts 6 women engaged in woolwork and beautification, and there's plenty to say about the image, which I don't have time to do today. What's interesting about this calathos is it was excavated from a grave in Athens in 1814, so shortly after Sir Charles Monk's visit to Athens. And we know this because it's noted that Lucieri, Elgin's agent, found the calathos on this drawing by the English architect Cockerell, which is held in the British Museum. How the calathos came to Newcastle is a complete mystery. And I retrace some of what we know about that journey in a short video on the Athens page of the exhibition, which Susanna inadvertently started playing then. I didn't want to play the video. I thought it would be too excruciating to watch myself. I wanted just to add a little postscript to this, which isn't included in the exhibition, about the reception of the Calathos, and that is that the Calathos was very well known in the 19th and 20th century. There is a sketch of it by the French painter Ingres, and the figures also feature in and amongst the design. Sorry, it's a bit of a blurry picture. I had to take it on a step ladder. This design for the Villa Kerylos, which was the home of the Grecophile scholar Theodore Reinach, an elaborate reconstruction of a Greek-style villa just outside Nice. I'm going to hand back to Susanna now.
Good. So that's, if you like, sort of the background in terms of how we got sort of engaged with the various partners to this project, and where how our own research links into this. So we're now going to look a little bit at the exhibition itself. The travels of Munch in the Mediterranean form the sort of, if you like, the narrative backbone of the exhibition. There were two of them. As a young man, an epic honeymoon through quarantine, plagues, and the Napoleonic Wars in 1804 to 1806. And later on a journey as a much older man in 1831 to Sicily, where he does a whirlwind tour of the island in January with lots of alarming weather conditions. So the exhibition is sort of built around that. Going to use the way in which the exhibition works is that we've got audio clips from Munch's diary, like the one that you heard from the start, and they're contextualized through photographs, both of Greece and Sicily, and of the Belsay site itself, and some drawings and paintings by Munch and by his contemporaries, or from slightly later in the 19th century, that sort of set the scene in terms of the physical landscaping side. And then these are linked to artifacts related to the various locations that come into the Shefton collection. So returning to Vary and homing in on this as an example of our approach in this respect. As I've mentioned, Munch's inspiration for the quarry gardens is widely regarded as being Syracuse, but of course he didn't see those till much later. He could and almost certainly did see engravings of these. The engraving there on the right is from a book by William Wilkins, published in 1807, which is the year that the renovations of Belsay begin. And there's a copy of that in Munch's library, so the evidence is strong that he would have seen that. And he also, when he visited the cave, he visited it with Edward Dodwell and his artist Simeone Pomardi, and they had visited Syracuse earlier that year, so very likely they talked about it. It's even possible that Pomardi showed some sketches and drawings. What we've got here is Pomardi's drawing of the actual cave of Vary. So this kind of interaction between Munch and some of the professional antiquarians of his time is part of the story here. But as I mentioned earlier, we looked at other inspirations that might have come from the 1805 trip itself, particularly the Cave of Pan, and the way in which the diaries sort of show Munch's fascination. And with luck, that will get us to there. Make sure that's actually sharing. Good. And this is how the Vary page sort of appears. Down below is where you sort of click to get the diary entry. And then this is kind of the layout. Sally will be talking about the artifact side, but we then have a series of pictures, images, which the only thing here is that they do cycle through a little bit fast sometimes to read the full captions. You have to know that you right click to slow them down. But there we've got the picture of that I showed earlier of the Cave of Pan's natural rock formations, the combination of natural stonework and man-made pictures there, and the dramatic light and shade effect, which is very much part of the Belsay design. And then we've linked this to, this is a watercolor painting sketch of, oops, let's do that again. So, of the construction of the quarries, and then in particular, I think, to this artificially constructed grotto, which is part of the shaping of the quarrying at Belsay. The quarrying obviously had this practical purpose in providing the stone for the house, but the way in which Monk clearly ordered it to be shaped also plays into that. So the idea here is to explore the links between what Monk saw and how he responded to what he saw on his Greece trips, and how the site was recreated. Over to you, Sally. Again, so, are we going back to the slides, or are we staying?
Yes, if we go back to the slides. So you can see the pictures, the drawings of the artifacts on the page, and you click on those and they link into information about the artifacts, which I'm going to talk about the 3 artifacts we chose from the Shefton collection in just a moment. But first of all, I wanted to show you this beautiful 17th century painted window, which was installed in the Jacobean manor house attached to the castle at Belsay to celebrate the marriage of Sir John Middleton, who was Monk's great-grandfather, in 1699. And it shows the Middleton crest with the wild man device just at the top, and you can see in close-up there this device. The wild man appears to have been an emblem of the Middleton family for centuries, and this sculpture stood on the gateposts of the formal gardens at Belsay Castle in the 17th and 18th century. The mythical wild man figure was said, like the Greek god Pan, to make his home in forests, caves, and crags. And wildman imagery in Celtic mythology parallels the role of Pan in the Greco-Roman world. This link with the Greek god Pan and the cave of Pan at Vari was the starting point for our selection of artifacts for Vari. I worked with Andrew Parkin, Keeper of Archaeology at the Great North Museum, to identify objects we could match to Monk's diary entries. And just to be very clear, these artifacts have nothing to do with Monk. Rather, we were connecting the kind of their stories to Monk's story. So we obviously chose a range of artifacts which we have in the collection representing Pan, the god of the wild shepherds and countryside, who appears as half man and half goat. On the clay antefix here on the left, you can see the unkempt hair, very similar to the wild man, and also these animal ears as well. In the centre there, you can see a representation of Pan, which was once part of the handle on a large volute crater, a mixing vessel, and the horns in the centre of the head identify this face as that of Pan. And finally, the small bronze statuette represents Pan, like the wild man on the painted window holding his staff. So we hope that you will visit and enjoy the exhibition, and we would really appreciate any feedback you have to offer so we can evaluate the exhibition. There's a very short questionnaire which will only take minutes to complete, and it's linked to the homepage. It's there on the bottom of the homepage where it says leave feedback, takes you to a little questionnaire which will then be sent to us. We hopefully can use evaluation to develop our future projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this talk in a Manchester Classical Association seminar series. These events are open live to members who can ask questions after the recording has finished. You can become a member for £15 a year or £10 for key workers and students. The money we raise helps us to fund other projects involving young people, primary schools and libraries, where we introduce Latin and classical topics to people who don't usually have access to it. We do a lot of work you can read about on our website, including text days, reading and performance competitions, and all kinds of other activities. If you enjoyed this video and you don't want to join, you can still happily donate to us a couple of quid on our Ko-fi account. The links to this are in the description, as are links to Facebook and Twitter accounts where you can follow all our activities on there. Please feel free to enjoy the rest of our recordings and hope to see you at the next one.